And you were live.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. It's the one and only Majestic Ape coming to you live, and it's none other than Harley Schlanger, and it's another edition of Harley, of Hanging with Harley, a man who needs no introduction. He is this voice of sanity and reason in an absolutely insane world, a voice of clarity, especially now that the fog of war and the fog of confusion that's coming out by the deep state of the establishment is thicker than ever. Harley is the lighthouse. With that being said, Harley, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing good, V. How are you?
Oh man, I can't keep track of this. I mean, this morning me and CJ were talking about Valerie Jarrett moving into the Shadow White House. I mean, it's going crazy, Harley.
Yeah, I guess she's homeless.
She probably is.
No longer in the White House, so she has nowhere else to go.
Yeah, just living out her sycophant fantasies over there of being a White House lackey. You know.
Wait, actually, she was a White House controller, to be
That's
more,
right.
but I'm sure she's going to continue that role. There's an interesting article in the New York Times this morning about how it was the Obama administration that started the whole series of leaks around the so-called Russia hacking story,
Yeah.
because they were afraid that when Trump got in, he would destroy all the evidence. That's the line they have.
Mm.
But they quote all these anonymous staffers who say, "Oh yes, we were on this big time. We were working on it because we were afraid that we were turning over the country to a Putin puppet. But don't worry, Obama wasn't involved at all."
Mm.
Now, if you believe that, then you probably believe the stock market is sound at this point.
Yeah. Exactly.
The other thing about the story that's interesting is they admit that classified information was being leaked by this team of investigators in the White House, not only to people like Senator Cardin of Maryland, who's one of the people leading the witch hunt on the Democratic side against the Trump administration, but is being leaked to, quote, European allies. And then the Times later on mentions that much of this material was classified. So
Mm.
here you have top Obama staffers delivering classified intelligence to so-called European allies. So I think it's time for Trump to put a few of these guys in jail.
I think so. I think a message needs to be someone needs to be made an example of. See, I kind of liken this to a prison. And when there's a new tough guy that's coming to prison, one of the best messages that can be sent is for the new guy to shank somebody who's considered another powerful individual in the prison yard. That typically establishes a pecking order rather quickly. And I think it's about time that Trump shanks somebody in this prison yard, and that they know that he's serious.
Well,
I,
he did this other thing. He released the Senate Intelligence Committee report on torture, which was covered up by Bush. It was covered up by Obama. It was finally uh, declassified, but was not delivered to anybody. It was kept under lock and key and heavily redacted. And Trump delivered one of the copies that's not redacted to a federal court. Now,
mm,
I think that's another signal that if these guys keep playing this game, he's got some cards that he can play. You might say
yeah,
he's got some trump cards.
yes, he does.
Now, the other thing that was a missed opportunity last night, I mean, I thought the speech was interesting, bringing up Lincoln on protectionism. This is something long overdue. The Republican Party became a free trade party in the 20s, 1920s, and it's been off the rails ever since. And Trump bringing up Lincoln's comments on the need to protect native enterprise was quite significant. Bringing up the 1876 Centennial Exposition, this was where all the world came and saw how the United States had surged ahead in science and technology. And countries like Germany, Japan, Russia, Italy tried to then find out what was America doing, and they found out it was national banking, it was protectionism, and it was favorable credit to entrepreneurs and investors for industry and manufacturing. And you had an explosion of production worldwide in the latter part of the 19th century, which caused the British Empire to launch what became World War I to stop it. So when Trump brings up 1876 after talking about Lincoln and protectionism, it becomes clear he knows something about economics. He's not just some business tycoon who knows how to wheel and deal. Now, that's why the missed opportunity was he should have announced Glass-Steagall last night. This would have freaked out Wall Street. It would have forced the issue with the Democrats who say they're anti-Wall Street. If they're anti-Wall Street, will they back Trump? So it was a missed opportunity. And he may not have too many more of these opportunities because one of the things that you and I have been talking about the last few weeks is what's happening with the British banking system, the Italian banking system, Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank, the Erste Bank group in Austria, which is really tied to Italian banks. And now the chaos in the French elections, the French banks are in terrible shape. So you've got a situation where, as we've been saying, a couple of bad derivative trades could trigger a domino-style collapse of the whole banking system. Look at HSBC, no profit for 5 quarters. Royal Bank of Scotland is scrambling to try and show something positive. So the core banks of the financial institutions, of the financial system, are in trouble.
Yeah.
And the complete hysteria over should we or should we not raise interest rates has everything to do with their fears that these banks in the US will start cratering if rates go up. So, with this kind of weakness in the banking system, Trump has to move. And I think it's important now for him to recognize that he's in the office, he is the president. They're not going to stop attacking him. Look, they're now putting Jeff Sessions on the bullseye on Sessions.
Ridiculous.
So he's got to move on this, and it includes moving against the deep state, the FBI, people like Brennan, people like Clapper. They got the scalp of Flynn, but Trump has to turn this thing around.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing better than an example being made. Somebody has to fall. That's why I said, there has to be a high-profile move taken down against somebody who's very high-profile in the next 3 to 6 months.
I'd say the next 3 to 6 days would be good.
Yeah, that'll be even better. The next 3 to 6 days would be even better. Absolutely.
The other thing that is being not discussed, but which is totally significant, is Trump has had a shift in his relationship with China, in his discussion that he's not going to go after currency manipulation. He's not going to end the one China policy, but he's going to sit down with the Chinese and talk about infrastructure, talk about cooperation.
Yeah.
The situation with Russia is still open for Trump to do that. I mean, you've even got this, I just came across this report, which is really fantastic. A meeting in Islamabad, Pakistan. So one of the last places you'd expect to read about modern science and technology. But there was a conference of something called the Economic Cooperation Organization, which includes Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. The only one missing of the stans is Stan Laurel. Who was the main speaker? The Chinese vice foreign minister. And the topic was how we're going to develop that part of South Asia. And they're talking about ports. They're talking about Erdogan saying Istanbul is going to have the biggest, most modern airport in the world. These countries are moving. Africa is moving. Asia is moving. Abe just announced he's going to be having 2 meetings with Putin in the next 4 or 5 months. So the opening is there now for Trump to jump in. In May, there's a summit in Beijing on the New Silk Road. This would, and the Chinese head of one of the counselors of state was just in Washington to meet with Tillerson and others, and he stopped by and met with Trump and gave Trump a personal invitation to join Xi Jinping at this event. So here's the opportunity. Forget the British, forget the Europeans for now. They're collapsing. They're practically insane. If you look at the French election, they're one sex scandal away from not having any candidates. So, and I'm sure they can manufacture a sex scandal pretty easily over there.
Yeah,
so,
anybody could. All you need is either a man or a woman to yell rape.
Yeah. So with this kind of potential chaos, there's a way out. Now, I've done a series of meetings in the last week. I did a conference in Dresden. I met with some investment bankers of the old-fashioned sort in Hamburg. You know, Hamburg's an old banking center,
Yeah.
trading center, and there are a lot of 40-year-old investment bankers who don't like the big banks. They're looking for real investment opportunities, and they invited me in to give them a talk on what's happening in the United States. I have a meeting next week in Frankfurt with a similar kind of group. There's openness. They want to know, what can we do to attach ourselves to this potential in the United States? And I tell them, you have to dump the existing system, but you also have to make sure that everyone you know in America knows that you support the idea of Trump throwing out the existing financial system in Europe as well as in the United States. So I think we can get a global consensus that were Trump to move, he'd find lots of support around the world.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that, and that's what people want to see. People want to see that these evil sycophants from the deep state can not only be pushed around, but they can be defeated and put an end to. And that's what people want to see. People want this evil to end. I mean, when you have idiots like Eric Holder out there saying, "Oh, he's coming,
Yeah,
he's coming, he's ready to roll."
yeah.
I mean,
Well, you saw it again, all these so-called progressive Democrats who thought the Bernie faction would take over the party, and it ends up in the hands of a Clinton operative, this guy Tom Perez. So you have to get outside of the existing party structure, which is what Trump did to win the election.
right.
And this is a hard thing for people who think in terms of fixed institutions, fixed relationships, but all these fixed relationships are collapsing. One of the things I discussed at this meeting in Hamburg the other day was, someone was saying, well, what do we say to people who are savers? Because the German people are notoriously good at saving money, putting it away, and not just for their retirement, but so there's money available in the Sparkassen, the savings banks, to
Hmm.
invest in the Mittelstand and machine shops and small business. And now they're all being destroyed because with no interest rates, you get no return on your savings. And if you have inflation, which Draghi is pushing, the European Central Bank and also Yellen are pushing, then you not only don't get interest, but you lose money because of the inflation. So they're saying, what do you do? How do we deal with this? And I told them, look, the pension funds are as good as gone if we don't go to a new system. Because
Yes.
look what happened in 2008, which was sort of a dress rehearsal for a bigger crash coming down the pike right now. You think your 401k is swelling like crazy because the Dow Jones is up. That can disappear overnight.
Yeah, instantaneously.
Unless we invest in physical economy and physical production, in putting people to work and educating the next generation, if we don't do that, we're not going to have a nation. We're not going to have money. I don't care whether it's gold, silver, paper. You know, if a government is evil and you have gold, they'll come steal your gold.
Right, 1000%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the most important thing that people don't real. Oftentimes we get so convoluted and wrapped up in the argument of, oh, what is our currency backed by? What is our currency backed by? When you look at history, I mean, there was a time when uh, even in the Roman era, there was a time when the Roman Empire, they backed their currency with tin, and they were incredibly, incredibly prosperous because that tin, the money was pretty much in the hands of the people. Then the shift came where they backed their money with gold, and it absolutely impoverished the entire empire. So it's not about what
That,
your currency is backed by; it's about who's controlling your currency.
yeah. And not only that, V, but with the Roman Empire, what happened was that they moved away from the other thing that was the base of prosperity, which was the what we would call today the family farmer.
Correct.
They outsourced their food production to the colonies, and they were set up for any kind of rebellion meant the food supply to Rome would be cut.
Yep.
You know, if you actually study history, you realize that it's really not the money system per se which provides security or prosperity. It's when you have people who are in a position to determine what governments do. The
Yep.
problem with monarchies, this is what the founding fathers realized, is you have no control over them, no way to bring a monarchy down except bringing it down. The
Exactly.
monarchs will decide to act irrationally, and you can't do anything about it.
Right.
We set up a Republican country with a small r, a Republican democracy, where the people are sovereign. But we've seen that taken away. And so now you have people who don't believe they're sovereign. And if they were sovereign, they don't know what to do because they've been miseducated. They've been manipulated by this left-right paradigm, uh, austerity or Keynesian multiplier effect. And they've forgotten that what made America great was what George Washington and Ben Franklin understood, the Hamiltonian credit system. You make credit plentiful for those people who are innovators,
Yes.
entrepreneurs, people who will build things, scientists, engineers. That's how Germany became prosperous. Even
Right.
Italy, northern Italy, was tremendously prosperous based on that. So those are the lessons. Now, if Trump is listening to Hanging with Harley, I would just tell him, Donald, go with Glass-Steagall today. Don't put yourself out there without this protection. And I think that's an important bit of advice that comes from Mr. LaRouche.
Mhm. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Because that ends the chicanery. That ends. You're basically cutting the blood supply to the tumor. That is the deep state.
Yeah. And the other thing is that a lot of these deep state guys are part of the deep state because they get paid by the deep state. They're promised they'll get the consultancies after they leave government or the think tanks or the other institutions. If that source of funds is cut off, what are they going to do? They'll suddenly become Trumpsters.
Yeah. Hmm.
But you have to make sure that the guys who are running it are not allowed to convert, because those you can't trust. Those have an ideological commitment to the system as opposed to just the people who are easily bribed or blackmailed or bullied.
Right. Exactly. Exactly correct. Exactly correct. What else do you see is on your radar?
Well, I think the other thing that people have to take a look at is the silliness around the Federal Reserve. And I mentioned
Oh
this
God.
earlier, but this is a game. The Dow Jones is what is it, 2,500 points since Trump came in. It's gone up. I mean,
And
it's
more
going
so
through the
paper
roof.
wealth. Yeah.
Now you have this phenomena of the small investor who starts thinking he's a genius because his portfolio is going up.
Hmm.
And they have to realize their future, if they're not doing something about defeating the deep state and taking down the Wall Street titans of finance, then their future is in the hands of people who are incompetent, immoral, and swindlers. And so you can't try to read the tea leaves of what the Federal Reserve is going to do to determine your investments. You've got to take a proactive approach. And so that's why, if you look at this question of infrastructure, PricewaterhouseCooper put out an interesting report this last week on China. And they said, we were wrong. The Chinese infrastructure plan is creating real value. It is creating real wealth, not just because it's creating jobs that produce more consumers, but because they're using their credit system to build for the future, as opposed to creating debt bubbles the way we are in the West. So when even someone like Price Waterhouse recognizes that, I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely correct. It's truly remarkable to see all this happen, Harley. It really is. It's I really want, like, I'm getting so fed up just watching this nonstop attack. Now, the question that I have for you, Harley, is this: is this Russian hack thing the only thing they have? Because they're putting their entire weight behind this whole Russian involvement. Russian involvement. That to me reeks of complete desperation.
Well, it is. It is desperation because they've had now, what, 6 months, and they haven't turned up a single piece of compelling evidence.
Mm,
But they keep asserting there are anonymous sources who are insiders who have the evidence, but they can't release it because someone would be compromised. Well, obviously they don't have, what would be compromised is the fact that these guys have any validity or credibility.
mhm.
Uh, but there are a couple of other things to watch out for. One is this whole Israel question.
Yeah.
Trump is being pulled into this thing. I think the Israelis are not through carrying out mischief. working with the Saudis, working with terrorists for destabilization. I know Putin is trying to flank them a little bit. Putin's even trying to flank the Saudis.
Yeah.
But to do that, you really do need to bring Trump in. I think one of the other things besides Glass-Steagall is that Trump should change his schedule so he can meet with Putin sooner rather than later.
Yeah, 1000%. I agree with that. Yeah.
And this will make Alec Baldwin and the Saturday Night Live crowd go wild.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who like that will have a lot of fun with it. But the deep state will be crushed because they're counting on having permanent warfare continue.
Yeah.
And part of the condition of permanent warfare is no Russia-US collaboration, so they can continue to create terrorists and deploy them at will.
Right.
So Glass-Steagall and carry through his promise to end this regime change war confrontation with Russia. If you do that, and then start orienting toward the Silk Road, go ahead with this economic nationalism. You know, you can call it protectionism. I think the old term used to be economic nationalism. That's a good idea. It's something that has to be done. And I think we'll find that those will go a long way toward putting us in good shape. And one final point, V, I don't know if this escaped your vision or not. You usually catch these things. But the new head of NASA is saying that we want to get back to the moon maybe before 2020.
Right. I heard. Yeah, I've seen that. Yep.
That's a good thing because
Yes,
you're talking now about speeding up the developments of technologies that depend on scientific breakthrough.
Yeah.
You're also talking about looking at the moon once again as a stepping stone to deep space. So I think we should be looking toward deep space and not succumbing to the deep state.
Amen to that, man. Very well said. Absolutely. Harley, give out your closing comments as well. I mean, your what is it? Your how people can follow you, how could they can contact you, and your last word, sir.
Well, one of the best ways to follow me is tune in to Hanging with Harley every week.
That's it.
Because we have a chance to have a fairly good, compact conversation. If people want more, if they want to hear some more or look at some more, you can go to LaRouchePack.com, which is the website of the LaRouche movement. Lyndon LaRouche is so far ahead of his time on these things that
He really is.
It's really worthwhile to look at. And then if people want to be in contact with me, I got some interesting friends of yours from Northern Ireland who contacted me a couple weeks ago. So,
oh wow,
they're fighting the British banks. So if people want to be in touch with me, send me an email to harleysch@gmail.com. I usually respond to most of these emails, and it's an opportunity for me to get to know the audience better and for them to know me better, and work together to create the kind of movement that will fulfill the worst nightmares of the deep state.
Absolutely. Harley, thank you so much for being on. And folks, again, like Harley said, if you want to, keep tuned and keep in touch with every time there's a Hanging with Harley, subscribe to the channel. There's a notification bell right next to the subscribe button. Click that notification bell, and every time that Hanging with Harley comes on, you will be alerted, and this way you could tune in. With that being said, guys, you could also follow again. Check out LaRouchePack.com, and also check out RogueMoney.net. With that being said, thank you all for listening in, and have a great week. Again, thank you so much. All right, CJ, take it away.